I don't make Scream videos, but I have to admit that out of any horror series, it probably has the most consistent level of quality. And before the fifth film was released a few days ago, I could say that I loved every installment. And much of my fondness for this series was derived from liking its three main protagonists, Sidney, Gale, and Dewey. I found them all either very likable or interesting. A big part of this may have come from watching other horror series like Friday the 13th, where there are either no recurring characters or they purposely make most of the cast unlikable so that the audience supports Jason killing them. I saw the newest Scream opening weekend and was very disappointed with Dewey's demise. In spite of reading spoilers the night before, I've been even more disappointed by some of the defenses made for the choice by online commentators. I am not a person who doesn't offer constructive criticism, so I will praise the character work that was done for Dewey in the film. I like that his injuries have taken a physical toll on him and that he is still willing to help random people when they are under distress from Ghostface. That being said, I did have an issue with his romance with Gale being over. Not necessarily the relationship ending, because I think it creates potential for conflict between two of the three leads, but the fact that he is stated to be the one that ended it. I don't buy it, because he was shown to be in love with Gale while the latter was trying to advance her career. I don't think he would be the one to end it based on his characterization in the previous movies. One of the problems with killing off characters, especially long-running ones that fans of a series would be invested in, is that sometimes you rob yourself of the ability to do something interesting with them. Dewey mentions that he was asked to step down as sheriff, but we never find out why and when. We also don't know if he left Gale after she was promoted to a TV host or before. There are things that could have been explored more if he was allowed to live, such as the examples I just gave. These are things that writers who did not create the character wrote for the character that, thanks to his death, have been reduced to surface level developments instead of interesting ways to propel Dewey forward. I guess I'm in the 1% of horror fans that would prefer an interesting character arc for one of the three most important characters in this series to another generic death. The more I think about it, Scream 2022 really is the Force Awakens of this series, and you can see a lot of Han Solo in that movie in this film's version of Dewey. Both films have a legacy character who partners with the new protagonist, gives them a strained relationship with people from their past, and then kills them off to prop up a new villain. And this is ironically one of the reasons I love Scream 4, because it took many of these attempts at making new generation trilogies and flipped them on their head by having the main trio still be the focus to a new group of killers who wanted to appear to be new versions of older protagonists. It's been very disappointing to see people not only approve of killing him off, but also act as if it needed to happen. I don't like to call out other channels by name because you either get accused of trying to start drama or mentioning someone else to get views off of a bigger person, but I'm going to break my rule to quote someone I respect and generally like the content of. In his Scream 2022 review, Dr. Wolfula observed of Dewey's death, "His time had come, and his demise made it feel like the rest of the main trio could die. It added dramatic weight and motivation going into the finale." I don't know what his time had come means. Is there some manual on how many horror films a character who isn't a killer can appear in before they die? And why does one of the trio who weren't the focus have to die for the B-Team sequel to have dramatic weight? Shouldn't that have come from Sam and her sister, the characters who get the most screen time and plot relevance, being in distress from Ghostface? I really want to kill this needed to happen line that's been used by the film's defenders. As far as we know, David Arquette is open to playing Dewey as much as the filmmakers would like. Just to give an example, when Jamie Lee Curtis's character of Laurie Strode was killed off screen and then on screen in Halloween 4 and Halloween Resurrection, this was done because she did not want to continue playing the character. When Iron Man died in Avengers Endgame, that was mainly due to Robert Downey Jr.'s contract being up and the Russo brothers meticulously crafting a conclusion for him over the course of 3 movies. It's not as though Arquette's contract was up or he was sick of playing the character. There was neither necessity to kill Dewey from a behind the scenes or narrative standpoint. I despise when people talk about a movie or something else that was written by human beings needing some plot element to happen. They didn't have to kill Dewey off. No one forced them to. They wanted to. You can keep the original trio alive and still have dramatic stakes and shock people. Here's an example of how this could have been done. Tara survives her encounter with Ghostface at the beginning of the movie, the first instance of this happening. We are then given a narrative that mostly focuses on her sister Sam attempting to protect her, with the latter serving as the film's main protagonist. What would have been shocking would have been to have Ghostface kill Sam when Dewey goes with her to save Tara at the hospital, and then have your true protagonist be the first character we're introduced to in the movie, as well as someone who is injured from the start, and thus leads us as the audience to be more fearful of her potential fate. Then you can have her partner with the original trio to get revenge for her sister. If they did this, we would be surprised multiple times by having the female character of the opening scene be our main character, her sister who is set up as the lead dying halfway through, and the main trio not having any of its members targeted by Ghostface for once. Dewey was originally supposed to die in the original film, but it was kept alive by series director Wes Craven after the character tested well with test audiences. Scream 4 was supposed to be the start of a second Scream trilogy, and we know that it was Kevin Williamson's intention to keep him alive, as he's disclosed plot details of Scream 6 focusing on the relationship between Gale and Dewey. The point I'm making here is that the creators of this character opted for him to be kept alive, and when you have a pair of writers and directors choose to kill him off in a movie that purports itself to be a requel or relaunch of the series, it can come off as someone dishonoring the IP of another creator to prop up new, less interesting characters. Williamson and Craven understood that the main thing this series had going for it were its three great protagonists. And that's a lesson that has not been carried over by their successors. Craven got a lot of flack for killing off Randy in Scream 2, and I believe he learned his lesson about the extent of an audience's investment in a horror protagonist to never consider doing this again. One of the ramifications that comes from killing off Dewey is that now I'm left with the ponderance of what these edgy people behind this series will do to Gale and Sidney. Who's to say they don't kill Gale off in Scream 6 or 7, or get rid of Sidney in Scream 8 or 9? People will say this is good because it means no one is safe, but the way I look at it, I'm wondering how long it'll be before the people who didn't make these characters decide to remove them with ridiculous deaths from the story just to surprise people or prop up inferior replacements. And when you consider how much they did to prop up Sam, it also leaves you wondering if they'll kill her off in the next movie or the one after that. We were just introduced to Deputy Judy in the previous movie, and she gets murdered after what seems like less than 2 minutes of screen time in this film. So I have no hope that they'll honor any character they decide to kill off that's been around for more than one movie. I'm not excited for any of this because I prefer interesting characters to lazy, shock value drivel like what we saw in Scream 5 with Dewey's fate. Sometimes I hate being a horror fan because in any other series, having a new writer kill off an older character they didn't make just to prop up new ones and get a cheap shock would be panned. But when you have a segment of edgy people who don't care about anything outside of killing watching your content, I guess you appeal to the lowest common denominator. And I'm not bitter enough to hope that Scream 5 fails, but I am honest enough to admit that I don't care to see another one made. I think this is the worst movie in the series by a landslide, and Dewey's death is only half of my issue with it. And if we get a Scream 6, no matter how many reviews generically claim it to be the best since the original, I won't watch it because its current handlers took one of the few things that made this series special and desecrated it for a cheap shock. I will not financially support a series run by edgy, insecure filmmakers that have to destroy the old to get people to latch onto their new, inferior ideas or characters. I will instead cherish the 4 original Scream movies and watch David Arquette and other films as a way of supporting his contributions to the horror genre and the film industry as a whole.